What's up guys, welcome to new Unreal Engine 5 video. Today I'm breaking down the top 3 biggest mistakes to avoid in Unreal Engine 5 and how to fix them. Many of these are habits that beginners usually have, including you, and if you manage to fix them, you will massively improve your Unreal workflow. The best part is that it's easy, it just takes time. With that said, let's get started. But first, if you are serious about learning and making your first game in Unreal Engine 5, join my Unreal Club. Inside, you will be able to download entire private files from my tutorials, enter private meetings and webinars with industry experts, access exclusive ebooks packed with the best tricks, get powerful asset frameworks to speed up your blueprints, and much more. The link is in the description. With that said, let's continue with the video. Alright, the first big mistake that you'll hear a lot is overusing casting instead of interfaces. Every time you cast, it creates a dependency, which means it's saving a direct reference in memory to the class you're trying to cast to. In the long run, this can be a problem. Every time you open your game and players start playing, all of this is loaded into RAM. If there's a lot going on, it can really impact performance, especially if you're using casting inside something like event tick. The solution is to use blueprint interfaces. Interfaces let you communicate between actors without dependencies. This means you don't need a direct memory reference used to interact with something. For example, interfaces are great for interaction systems where a bunch of actors need to communicate with each other. Now, very important, I'm not saying that casting is bad and you should never use it. In many cases, casting is actually better. You will even see me using casting in a lot of my tutorials because sometimes it just doesn't make sense to use interfaces everywhere. This is also because if an asset is already referenced somewhere else, like in the animation blueprint that's already on screen, avoiding casting won't make any difference because that memory reference already exists. So it's really about learning when to use casting and when to use interfaces, and over time you will just get it. The next big mistake that beginners make is having messy blueprints, basically not organizing their code. This results in hard to read, hard to debug spaghetti code, which wastes time. And if you're working on a team, well, no one is going to understand what's going on. So the fix is to use comments. Just highlighting a few nodes in your event graph, pressing your keyboard, and boom, you'll get a neat little box where you can organize your code into categories. This is super useful whenever you're working alone or also in a team. Another pro tip is to use the Q key. If you select some nodes and press Q, they will auto-align, making everything way cleaner. I use this all the time in my tutorials and it makes a huge difference. No more floating cables everywhere. The next huge mistake that a lot of beginners and even intermediate devs make is overusing event tick. So what is event tick? Well, it runs every single frame. Most games run at 60 FPS, sometimes 30, but the target is always 60. So imagine if you are running heavy code on every frame, 60 times per second. That's gonna wreck performance, especially in big levels or complex blueprints. So the solution can be to use timers. Timers are super easy to set up. Just use the set timer by event node and it will execute your action every few seconds instead of every single frame. Another thing that you can do is disable tick for actors that don't need real-time updates. Just go to the default panel in the actor settings and disable it. It's that simple. Now, just like casting, I'm not saying event tick is bad. In many cases, you actually need it. Sometimes you do want to check something every frame like player velocity, but if you can avoid using event tick when it's not necessary, your game will run way better. Another performance killer is not using LODs, which are level of detail, for models that don't have nanite enabled. LODs have been used in game development for years. They basically create different versions of a model, a low poly version for far distances, mid poly version for medium distances, and finally a high poly version for up close. As the player moves, the model automatically switches between these versions to save performance. Now, with nanite in Unreal Engine 5, you don't really need LODs anymore for most things, but there are exceptions. For example, nanite doesn't work great for trees and vegetation. In those cases, it's actually better to use traditional LODs instead of nanite. So don't ignore LODs, they're still useful in many cases like trees and some other complex meshes that nanite is not very good at. Another huge mistake is not using source control like GitHub. So what is source control? It's basically a system that keeps multiple versions of your project saved in the cloud. Why is this important? Well, if your project crashes or gets corrupted, you won't lose all of your progress. And especially if you're working in a team, it makes collaboration way easier. It doesn't matter if you're working alone or in a team, having backups is a must because source control will always have different versions saved of your project in the cloud. Now, you don't know how many times I've heard Unreal devs losing hours of progress just because their project crashed and they didn't save. Autosave doesn't always save when you expect it to. It might be every 30 minutes or more, and that's a lot of progress to lose. So here's a simple habit that will save your life. Ctrl plus Shift plus S. This keybind saves your entire project at once. I use it all the time on my tutorials, and you should too. The last big mistake is not organizing your content browser properly. As your project grows, the content browser gets huge, and if everything is just dumped in a random folder, it's gonna take forever to find assets. Imagine spending a whole minute just trying to find one blueprint that you created yesterday. Well, what is the fix? It is to organize your project from the start. Use folders for different categories and use naming conventions like BP underscore for blueprints, M for static meshes, etc. If you do this from the beginning, it will be way easier to keep everything clean as your project gets bigger. And that's it. If you found this video helpful, I would really appreciate it if you could like the video and subscribe to my channel. And if you want to accelerate your Unreal Engine learning, check out my new Unreal Club. The link is in the description. With that said, bye bye.